Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Honiger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Honiger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. Great to have you with us today, wherever you are, whether it's driving the kids home from school or heading off into town to pick up some stuff, or you're behind a mob of sheep or a mob of cattle. Great to have you listening along. This week we welcome Nigel Kerin back onto the show. We've had two great episodes with Nigel. I was chatting with him recently, and we thought it'd be a good time to update from things we've covered previously. It has been our highest rating show, so we thought we'd give you another version of Nigel. We structured a little bit differently this time. It's actually quite a long episode, and we were contemplating splitting it into two, but we're giving it to you as one and so you might have to have a couple of cracks at listening along. It's well worth the listen as always. We try to drill into different aspects than we have previously. And jump on, have a listen. We tried to cover different aspects than we have previously, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy this show. Before we get into that, this week on the Hub, I've written an article which is in response to a couple of questions I ask in the podcast now, and one of these came about when we were prepping for Nigel's show. I asked him the question of who's the best human you've had the pleasure to learn from, or something along those lines, which is the question I now ask on every show, which you will have seen starting to creep in. I thought I better answer that question myself, so I've written an article about that. I've also answered the question that I ask everybody, which is, what is the last thing you've changed your mind about? So if you want to get a bit deep with me, jump on the Hub, read that article. I'll sort of cover off, I guess, the family that have influenced me and other people throughout my career. Couldn't come up with a single one. It's my question, so I get to give you about 6 answers. But it was a good experience to go through, and I think everyone should do that. Actually, think about the people that have impacted their lives, and make sure if we haven't already, go back and thank those people for what they have done. Also wanted to quickly mention our live Hub event. The Foot Rot Focus Forum is on tonight. So if you're listening to this on Monday as it's come out, it'll be on tonight. You can tune in this evening and have a listen. For those of you listening later, the recording will be on the Hub. So if you want to watch that back, jump on there. It won't be too long afterwards after that show. So if you're listening later in the week, it should be up on the Hub already as recorded. It's a great forum with Herman Rudsmar, the two vets from MSD, Jim Walsh and Kim Kelly, and Charlie Douglas Clifford, as well as myself. So a full rundown of people from farming right through to vets, and us in the genetic space in between. So highly recommend jumping on tonight if you're listening on Monday, or going back and checking out that recording. Also, we're not too far away from the World Angus Forum. The Angus Expo in Tamworth is on in a couple of weeks' time. We're going to be there with 3 or 4 of the team from NextGen Agri. So if you happen to be around Tamworth towards the end of the month with the Angus Expo, we'd love for you to come up and say good day. We're going to be there talking about our new tools, our Next Select tool, which is our index tool. We've got our Next Mate tool, which is our mate allocation tool. We've got our Next BV tool, which is generating breeding values for the traits that aren't offered by in current analyses. And Next Class, which is our screen that brings all the data to race side or crush side or yard side. So we'll be there to talk about those aspects. We'll have their developer Tom with us, and Phoebe and Amber and myself will all be there to talk all things Angus. I'm on the stage talking about efficiency in cows. We're also doing a live podcast from the expo, and we're doing a couple of other things as part of the event as well. So it's going to be a great couple of days there in Tamworth. If you can get along, I'd highly recommend it to talk all things Angus cattle. Is going to be a great roll-up. There's a lot of people bringing cattle, and it's going to be a really great event. Righto, we'll get underway with this week's show with Nigel Kerin from Kerin Ag. Welcome back, Nigel Kerin, to Head Shepherd. It's number 3 on here. We haven't had any guest on 3 times now, but you're the first to hit that target. We thought we'd have another chat. People always enjoy these episodes, so we thought we'd give it another crack. Welcome this morning.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm pretty excited. Both of us love talking about agriculture, and that's our favourite subject. And it's always good to share what you've picked up over the years being in the agricultural industry. So here we go again for number 3. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And one thing we probably judge ourselves on pretty hard is perseverance, and we had to persevere pretty hard this morning to get the tech to all work. We've had a bit of a struggle, but we're here, good to go.
35 minutes.
So anyway, that's the joy of tech. But Nigel, I guess we'll start off. People know your story. We've had you on before, so we won't sort of go back through that. But we want to sort of zero in on, I guess, the mindset you take to business, and that's really what we want to. Well, part of today's episode is really focusing on that. And I'm curious about, I guess, how your mindset and approach has evolved since the early days of family farming partnership, and then through to establishing your own operation in 2007. How those sort of adaptability and positive thinking principles have really been part of what you've done.
I think prior to 2007, we did family succession. Me and Kate started Kerin Ag. We were very just your stock standard, plain Jane sort of farming business. We thought no different to anyone else. I think we ruminated over the same issues as everyone else, and we had the same answers as everyone else, which was there was no answer. So I think subconsciously you knew you didn't want to stay in that mode, and then it's been a really slow journey, so I think we just went about one by one eliminating any anxieties out of our business and life. And we didn't actually do that ourselves. We brought people in to help us through that. So that question will come up all the way, I think, through this discussion about people you bring into your business that help you master any anxiety that you're having in that business or family life or life in general. So very, very much stock standard business prior to 2007, and then since then a journey of investment into human capital, not so much the land capital, more so in the learning part of it. And that didn't happen pretty much till 40-year-old. It's not as if it happened early. And that was when I look back, that is the sad part. We didn't wake up to this earlier in life. So, slow journey of learning, I'd say.
It is interesting that I heard one of the podcasts I listened to recently and talking about how that sort of often it is sort of between 40 and 50 when you really do get most things sorted out and kind of get organised. So it's probably, I guess, there's plenty of early 20-year-olds out there keen to get going, and that's a good thing. I guess we just got to accept that sometimes it takes us a bit longer. And I guess, certainly there's lots of things now. I'm in my 40s that I would have done differently if I had known what I know now, but that's just how life rolls.
I think one of the things, especially with young men, is they're that busy being busy, and they think to get ahead in life is to go as hard as they can. And now looking back, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, and we'll drill into that, and that'll be good. One of the things that anyone that sort of watches you on socials will know how quickly you can scale livestock numbers in response to a season. And I know there's lots of traders out there, but I think you have mastered that ability to, I guess, to really focus on that, on the grasping, which we'll cover later on. But I guess, how does that sort of opportunity-focused mindset that you've now got around the business, how does that sort of enable that level of flexibility compared to what maybe you see around the district or in other districts traditionally, sort of people who slowly change as seasons change? I
think that goes back to pretty much post-2007 when we started that business. We employed a business coach, and we were 100% livestock business. And he said, Nigel, until you come up with something that deals with climate, you're going to have a business that makes money in the good years and struggles in the not so good years. You can stay the way you are, or you can change. And for us, it was having a release valve that could be quickly released when season turned against us, and then being able to capitalise when the season turned back for the better. And that didn't happen overnight. There were so many unfortunately, you have to fail a lot to learn, especially with men. Usually 3 times you'll make the same mistake 3 times. And then after that, you're right as rain. You've learnt. It's hurt and you can't get better at what you do, unfortunately, till it hurt. And that's one of the things, I'll just go off track for a little second, why we set up a family board. Why let the same generation go through that, the next generation go through that in our business? So I guess one of the greatest things that ever happened to our business, we were slowly learning from 2007 onwards, but that 3-year drought we had that started at the end of 17, 18, 19 and ended in March 20 was the best single thing that ever happened to our business, because to come through that as well as we did, and then the rebound back into that, we went backwards over 3 years. It was $1.3 million. We actually went backwards. But we were back in the black 4.5 months after it broke in March 90. And that was, that wasn't all my doing. I had a lot of help doing that. And I was using 4 very good mentors that all had their heads screwed on. And they were mentors that never make decisions based on emotion or the noise that's going on in the industry. So I think you've got to go through that period of, you do make mistakes, and hopefully you'll do that on a small scale. One of my earlier mistakes was we did it on a large scale, and that hurt enough to only do it once, not 3 times. And since then, we've got so much better. And for me, and I'll say this heaps of times through this podcast, our number one enterprise now is managing risk. Risk management is our most profitable enterprise that we have in our business now, whether it's sheep or cattle. So, forward contracts and swaps and that, especially swaps, I think that are coming up into the future with the lamb breeding or trading business is going to be an absolute saviour for our industry, where it puts stability into the economics of what you're doing. So I think being agile, not fragile. I also know that whilst we were in that 3-year drought, we were always making decisions every month, and they were agreed decisions on what we do. But when that drought broke, the first thing we did was went back and looked at 3 years of what happened. Every month I was writing down things that were happening, and we did a flip chart sheet on what went well and what could have been better in that drought. So we had lots and lots of pages of what went well, things we did ahead of time, so we didn't have a train wreck. And then when it come to what could have been better in that drought, we had absolutely bugger all written down. They were tiny little minute things that didn't really add up to that much, because we were proactively planning. We were looking after our environment by the landscape by basically destocking as quick as we could. But that destock ended up lasting 3 years. So it was a long, slow destock, and we cash flowed most of it with the destock. And we're also holding, coming into that 3-year drought, we were holding a lot of wool on hand, not sold. And we cash flowed it. A lot of that was from holding wool on hand. So it was working out what have we got on farm that's too dear to own right at the now. And if it's you asked yourself the question, would you go and buy it at that price? No, I wouldn't. Well, if it's too dear to buy, it's too dear to own. So managing the cash flow through that drought was something that was the most important thing we could do. And I don't believe you can go into a drought that size. The thing is, you don't know how long it's going to be, so don't go in there thinking you're going to feed every single animal you own and come out of it in the black, because you won't. I don't know anyone that can do that. So, yeah.
I'm going to drill into that a little bit further. I think one of the things that is very clear in your business is the emotional detachment to any livestock on the place isn't as strong as what you might find in sort of traditional approaches, where kind of it's heartbreaking to have to start to chew into that ewe flock you built or that cow herd you built because you're in love with all of them. But obviously, somewhere along the line, you've known that you need to obviously keep the core of your business. You've got a stud business, and so keeping that core is important. But in reality, everything else is tradable and can be found again, as long as, like, with not except, we obviously don't want to bring in diseases and stuff as you rebuild, but there's ways to counter that. But when did was that from 2007, or has that been part of the learning over the time to sort of not be attached to any individual stock class in the place?
No, that come over time. It was fairly easy to break the shackles of that one way. Oh, my God, the breeding stock. We had 9,000 sheep in containment, and one day I got out of bed and I just said, right, I run all the stud ewes in, we're going to whack 30% of those out. And all we did was took 30% out on phenotype and data. Best thing we ever did, because it tidied up your ewe base, and then the product of that has come through in the last 3 years of ram sales, where it's so easy to put 500, 550 rams up at auction with great data and phenotype, because you got rid of all those lesser type ewes out of your flock. So cash flow comes first before emotion when it comes to breeding stock. I don't think I've ever worried about having to sell breeding stock, but there's been a lot of times where I scratched my head wondering how we were going to keep cash coming into the business. So which one creates the most anxiety? Cash flow. Well, that's the one you need to address first.
Yeah. I've heard you say plenty of times that no one's as smart as all of us, and there's various versions of that quotes that bounce around the world. And I want to just drill in on a couple of things. One thing, how you use your 4 mentors, or used those 4 mentors, but I guess that collaborative philosophy, how that shapes your decision making and the operations there at Kerin Ag.
You don't have to be that clever to be really good at any business, providing you know your numbers. That part you have to learn yourself, where the money comes from, where it goes to, and what's left and what it gets allocated to. So that's just the financial literacy, and you have to learn that yourself, and you have to know that off the back of your hand every day. But in our case, we actually buy brains. I don't have to know everything. Kate doesn't have to know anything. Joe doesn't have to know everything. We buy brains into our business. And if I look at, we employ Next Gen Agri. We don't employ them so much for the sheep knowledge. We employ them for the knowledge that's locked up in their head and the conversation. When I'm trying to make a decision, I'll ring Mark Ferguson up and sit there and chew the fat with him and borrow information from him, and then sit down and come up with a good answer for this issue we may be dealing with. Like the family board, same thing. We're just buying brains to manage a business. Like business coaches are another way of buying brains. Lamex, not staying at home, getting off your bum going to Lamex, that's another example of buying brains. The Wagyu conference, which is coming up in 8 days or so over in Perth, that's another example of buying brains. I can't learn if I stay at home. And, you think, I'll stay at home and I'll work and I'll keep things going. I haven't got time and I haven't got money to go to that. Well, I learned very early that you have to go and buy that stuff and bring it back into your business. And I think one of the great examples of that was we sponsored the Xander McDonald Award. And last year we had the Xander McDonald Awards were over in Queenstown in New Zealand. And there was 2 particular speakers. There was 2 big one-liners I took home out of that conference. Turn shit into fertiliser, so that's mindset. No matter what happens to you, it's a shitty event, might have happened, turn it into fertiliser. And I just say that over and over in my head. The other one was, you can't trip a centipede. And what the guy that said that meant is, in business, keep eliminating the trips that are going to happen to you in your business, because if you're constantly got a subconscious bias looking for trips in your business, you eliminate those out of your business. And how do you know what a trip is? If it creates anxiety and makes you think about it, it's a trip. And when you fix that up, it's gone. So the funny thing is, when I look at the money we spend on buying brains into our business, and I nearly died when I seen this figure, because I sat down and added it up. We're spending about anywhere from 175 to 185 grand a year on buying brains. And this has been going on since 2007. Now, in 2007, we employed a business coach that would have been around, I'm guessing back then, around 14 grand a year. That was our first purchase of brains. So think about from 2007 to where we are now. We're gone from spending about 14 grand a year. Now we're at, say, 180. But when you sit back and reflect on what's happened to the business, as you've purchased brains, you've built and added on to your balance sheet. Now, this isn't a balance sheet created by increase in land values. It's a balance, that's part of it, but it's the balance sheet of knowledge where decisions in our business are not done based on emotions. They're based on economics and things like the amount of grass on hand, the amount of money, managing those two inventories of grass and money. And why the easiest way to build a healthy balance sheet is bring people into your business. So when I say buy brains, all we're doing is building balance sheet, strengthening and building a bigger and stronger business. And part of that knowledge is you're actually building guardrails. The guardrails in your business get narrower and higher to stop you going off the track. And the actual running of the business, be it sheep or cattle, should be very boring. Anyone can do it. There's no special skills involved, but it's the discipline to maintain those skills is where you make the money. And it's the discipline part where your guardrails, that's the discipline. Your guardrails get narrower and higher as you learn more as you go along. So for me, if I had any advice for any young couple, don't be scared of buying brains back into your business because it's too hard a slog to try and work it out by yourself. And, one of the great things about doing a podcast is that you actually reflect back on some of the questions and go, well, how did I get from here to here? How did we go from good to great? And this never come up till I started jotting down dot points for this podcast. We actually buy brains. That's what's got us to where we are. And what the part of the off spins of that is because you're out and about a bit and you've got other people coming into your business to help you, regardless of how old you are, your mental clarity and your mental health's a lot healthier because you're sharing your, I'm not going to say problems, you're sharing your mindset or anxiety of a particular thing with someone else, and they always come up with a solution for it, and that is deal with it straight away, and here's how we should deal with it. So that one's been an important one for me. And I just look at it now going, I don't know how you can get ahead in any business unless you bring people in that are not necessarily smarter than you. They've just got a different way of viewing and looking at it.
Yeah, interesting observation that balance sheet goes as you bring more knowledge into the business, which kind of makes sense. But it's great to hear it how it's played out. I'm interested in those 4 mentors you had throughout, and also your family board. I guess for people thinking about how they might have sort of informal networks that I guess we need to get people out of just talking about the weather and into talking about stuff that is going to impact on their business. And I guess what does that look like for those 4 mentors? That's just you ringing them up when you've got a question, or is there some sort of formal structure around that, or is that
there's no formal structures. They're not involved in the family board in any particular way. These are just 4 very smart people, one of them outside of agriculture, that are very good thinkers. And there's 2 extroverts and 2 introverts personalities. And when they all agree on the same thing, interest rates was another one. Like go back to when the interest rates started to decline. What's your gut feeling? I asked the same simple question. Like we're only talking 5-minute conversation.
Yeah.
What's your gut feel on interest rates? Do something about it. One of them said, how is it making you feel? I said, well, I'm starting to feel it in my gut. He said, well, there's your signal to do something. So we just took a cap and collar loan out for the biggest part of our borrowings on land, and we got rid of that anxiety straight away because it was locked in. We could go no further in interest rates, but if there was any reductions, we got to share in those reductions. So there's just an example. I have another guy who's a processor. They process both sheep and cattle, and I'll ring him up on, if you had $1 million to invest in sheep or cattle, which horse would you back in at the moment? And that changes all the time, and he'll give you the reasons why. And then I'll ask, well, which one do you think will be the easiest to get a forward price on? And straight away he'll say this one. And I go, yep, that's pretty easy. And so far he's never been wrong. And that was another really good example of not staying at home. I got invited to go on an ANZ bank trip over to China to look at the Chinese beef industry, feedlotting industry, processing industry. And when I got the invite, I went, why would they be asking a sheep cocky to go to China to look at the beef industry? But the networking we did on that trip created one of the mentors. So yeah, that was just another great example of don't say no. I can't go. I'm too busy, and we'll go into what creates that mindset of is I can't afford to stay at home a bit further as we go along, because there's a lot of things we've got to clean up in agriculture to be successful, and we'll come to that later on, I think.
Yeah, excellent. And we will keep moving. Nigel, many farmers struggle with the psychological weight of drought, and there's plenty of people in that situation in parts of the listenership at the moment, and that, I guess, drought, climate variability, it's part of agriculture. I guess you've been through those 3 years. There's inevitable lean periods in ag, whether that's a price-driven period or a weather-driven period. I guess, what are the sort of practical strategies that you use to sort of see opportunities where others might be just seeing challenges, I guess? And again, we're not making light of the situation many people are in, but there are different ways to handle those situations.
One of the most important things, and this came from buying brains into our business, was imagine you're sitting in the driver's seat of your Hilux ute. We keep looking into this tiny little rear vision mirror to make decisions based on the past. And sitting out in front of you is this massive, great windscreen, which is your future. And when it comes to making decisions in drought, we keep going back into our past to make those decisions. The world's changed. It never stops changing. Markets change, economies change, cash flows change, interest rates change. So the past is of no benefit to you. There's nothing there any good that you can pull out of the past to help you make a decision into the future. And when we were in that 3-year drought, what really come out of it is you develop, if you're making decisions on time, ahead of time, all the time, it's really good for mental health because you're staying proactive in your business and you're making decisions ahead of time. And there was no stuff-ups. There was no, oh, shit moments. Why didn't we do that? But one of the things that really, really, and the first thing we all think of is financial burden. So every day we were feeding sheep 7 days a week in containment, and it was running really well. They were healthy and happy, and our losses were virtually zero. Every day we were feeding out $3,000 worth of grain. It was just over $3,000. But the other costs of the business were around $9,800 a day just in cost to run the business and open the doors. So when you look at that, it was $13,000 every day to feed the animals, keep the business running. You break that down and you look at, okay, I know I'm not going to make any money this year, but what will I go back when this breaks? And you'd pick a month or months ahead, 6 months, 9 months, 3 months, and you go, I need to cash flow that to there, or I need to have borrowing set up to get me to there. There's an endpoint. But for me, it was about moving the pieces across the chessboard. The day it rains, what are we going to do? And that's where those 4 mentors come in. They actually all said there'll be one class of animal to get straight into that no one will want to touch. And they said it'll be a booming market the day it rains, and if it's a booming market, you'll get a full contract. And it's exactly what happened. So For us, it wasn't so much worrying about cash flow whilst we were in drought. Most of it we were able to cash flow through the sale of wool. And funnily enough, every day those sheep were in containment, we had a very strong wool market at the time. The wool they grew every day was paying for the feeding. That was an amazing period when you worked it out. And see how the only reason you'd ever work something like that out is to keep you happy.
Yeah.
We were selling ewes in good condition out of the feedlot to cash flow the feeding, and that made me happy. That's why we were selling them, to actually keep you in charge of the business and not worrying about digging a deep hole where you were borrowing your way to keep animals alive. So that's why I didn't fall in love with breeding animals. They had to be cash flowed. So I guess for me, it was looking at taking the emotion out of breeding animals. And when it broke, we now know this in hindsight, the day it broke, we jammed 3 years of cash flow into 1 year. And we were back in the black in 4.5 months after it broke. And how we did that was there was an email come out. It was JBS at the time, lambs at $9 a kilo. Now, I had blokes before this email coming me out, neighbours and people that live close to us. We got $9.70 canola, 2 foot high. Do you want adjustment? And the adjustment was $2 per head a week. So that contract, we ended up taking a contract out for, I think it was 15,800 lambs. We didn't own a lamb the day we took that out. We went and purchased all those lambs, took the contract out first, purchased the lambs, and then put most of them on adjustment. And a lot of them went to a farm that we just purchased going into the drought, and they went down there. Now, those lambs at $9 a kilo, did you have to put any information to give you the right answer? They were trading in the 100th percentile. There'd never been a contract for $9 a kilo. It's a no-brainer. You just do it. So because you were so quick coming back into the market, we weren't buying at the top. Put it through our spreadsheet. Look, it was an amazing return. So for every week, we had a $2 cost of adjustment, but we were putting on a kilo of dress weight every week, which was $9. So it left us with $7 profit. I think it was $113,000 a week or something like that of net profit. And most of those lambs, the great thing about sheep is it's fast turnover. If you're buying 38 kilo lambs, they're in and out in 12 weeks when they're on rocket fuel like that. And we had a lot of pastures in as well. So we cash flowed our way out of that straight away. I think one of the big things is if you decide to hold all your breeding animals, sheep or cattle, all the way through a drought and you've held them all, how do you take advantage of the cycle that happens when you come out of drought? How do you get in and do a quick trade when the season turns? Because when the market goes to record restocker levels, there'll be record feedlotters prices as well as processors price for both sheep and cattle. So for me, you can't dig your heels in with the climate we now have and just say, well, righto, I'm locked into 100% breeding, because what's showing up now, doesn't matter where you live in Australia, climate change or climate variability is active all across the world at the moment, and you can go overseas and that. So if I had my dad's climate, say the old man was boss up till 84, I'd do exactly what he was doing back then. He had a very simple breeding operation that was profitable, and it had short periods of climate challenges, not long periods like we get now. So I hope that answered the question. Did I?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the things I wanted to just drill in quickly was, well, just to highlight as much as anything, is it's that speed, like the proactive decision-making, regardless of how ordinary it looks out the window, means that you've made a lot of those decisions. Like you've talked to your financier, you've found ways that you're going to cash flow those or find the money for that stock you're going to buy. You know what class you're going to buy. So while everyone else is getting organised and thinking about what this might mean, you've already made all of those important decisions, and you just got to press go on a playbook, really, which is the different thing.
Everyone knew what we were going to do. Our agent knew what we were going to do. Our finances knew what we were going to do. Everyone knew, and it was written down what we were going to do. it wasn't scratch your bum and sort of, oh, yeah, righto, we'll have a crack at that. You'd done all the numbers. You knew how much finance you had to come up with to roll it, because we didn't have cash flow until we sold.
Yeah.
But the one thing you got to do is quickly turn grass into money as quick as you can, and that's your number one job as the CEO of your business. And there in itself lies the question, who is the CEO of the business? Is the CEO of the business at the coalface every day? Whether he owns a 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, $50 million asset. There's too many CEOs, the bosses of the business that now own these agricultural businesses, are still at the coalface every day chipping away. And it's hard to make decisions when you're at the coalface, because all you see is the coalface in front of you, and you're swinging an axe and a pick and a crowbar, chipping away every day. Well, these businesses now are too big to actually have that mindset anymore if you're chasing a positive return on asset. So I've said it a lot of times, the best thing that ever happened to our business was that 3-year drought. And it gave you so much confidence now that you can handle anything after going through that. And I think the most important thing is the use of other people's money, opium. If you're unsettled by borrowing money to purchase livestock, my advice is to quickly get over it. Because if you're a grazing dominant family business, then the grain growers don't have a problem with borrowing money to grow grain, do they? Like, everything's financed.
Yeah.
Why should we be any different?
That's a really good point. And we will talk finances. I've been there. I know that you're open to sharing your business financials and strategies with other farmers. You've often got people there on the weekend, give them a look around and throw the books open. Our industry is traditionally much more private about those matters, and sort of, I guess I feel like some people think we're in a bit of a competition, or we're competing with our fellow livestock people, which isn't really the truth. We're playing into massive markets, massive global markets. I guess what motivated your transparency to open the books, and what benefits have you seen from taking that approach?
Good question, and you're 100% right on people don't share enough. It all started back in the days this went back to about 2002, when we did a course called Grazing for Profit, and then we went on to a board called an Executive Link Board, where there was 6 other businesses that meet 3 times a year, once at Coffs Harbour, once at Sydney, and once at Canberra, and we'd have monthly, there was no such thing as Zoom back then, monthly phone hookups reporting on the business. So when you gathered at those places, you sat at a board table as if you had $1 million or $100,000 or $500,000 or $10 million. You had the mindset that you had money invested in the other board's businesses, and you wanted a return on it. So the one thing that come out of that is, you might have thought you had, before you actually got into and knew about these businesses and knew them intimately, their financials, you might have thought you had a really hot, a really shit hot business, or a really crappy one. You didn't know what it was until you actually sat with the board, and everyone, they took their bras off, they took their pants off, the whole board sitting there naked. And you're exposing everything about your financials, your history, your succession, your enterprises, everything. And you might have thought you had a good business until you stepped into there, or you might have thought you had a crappy business. And you might have thought you had a very complicated business and your succession was shit and this was shit and that was shit. It's not until you get into a room with other family businesses you realise how well off you are, how lucky you are, how grateful you should be, until you are exposed to other businesses. And the one thing that come out of those businesses, me and Kate did 3 years on one board. It finishes after 3 years, and then we did another 3 years on another board. So 6 years in total of executive link. And another thing with that, I just thought, if that was buying brains, I think it cost you something like $8,000 a year, or remember, this is back in the early 2000s. Cost you about $8,000 a year to be part of that. So you're buying brains back that far.
Yeah.
So when you look at the people that were on those boards, the ones that went from good to great all have one thing in common. They recognised their weaknesses and built them into strengths. The ones that wanted to maintain and challenge the status quo never went from good to great. And that was around here. This is how we do things. There's no need to even look at that. We live in a safe environment. That was the most common thing. When it comes to drought management, we live in a really safe environment. Well, let me tell you, that'll be one that will get you into a lot of trouble if you say that, if you think that's right. So what come out of that was you had no fear of openly sharing books inside that group because, you know, they never got discussed outside of that executive link board setup. And the part of that was you had to benchmark your business. And the actual learning of benchmarking is to show you where the money comes from, where it goes to, what's left over, and how you invest that. And it was financial literacy that drove the greatness that come out of that board. Is you learned how to run a business from being a green jackaroo to actually coming out of that after 3 years. You go, well, shit, I now know gross margin analysis, overhead ratios, all your KPIs in your business. So that was one of the most important things. But I think the reason I'm so open now, and I don't give a bugger, like I just talk openly about debt ratios and KPIs, the more open and the more you share, I have found that the quickest way to gain rapport and respect from a stranger. And I might be at Bendigo Sheep Show in our little tent marquee, just talking sheep. And we'll be talking anything but sheep. And when you gain rapport and respect by pulling your pants off and standing there naked, people are more open to you and they will have a genuine conversation. And I think you become a better person by doing that, because you can't expect to receive if you don't give to people. And some may call that karma. Well, I find if you give $1 away, you'll get $2 or $3 back. So that's been my learning over the years. Like my parents had never, ever talk about, even to the kids, talk about KPIs and ratios, mainly because they didn't know. But debt, you know, your debt and your finances were never spoken about. And guess what? That's probably why my generation knew bugger all about it, because it wasn't first-hand knowledge. Where in our business, we're talking about that stuff all the time with our siblings. So for me, open books is the easiest way I can gain rapport and respect from a complete stranger, because they go, oh, geez, he's pretty genuine, this bloke. So, and one of the things, we'll have a data projector set up on the kitchen table if someone wants to come and have a look around the farm and look at the business. And the reason we'll come into the kitchen table first and just whack up cash books, we might go 3 years through 5 years of financial years just looking at them, different enterprises, gross margin analysis, overheads, KPIs, all that sort of stuff. The question we'll ask them when we pull our boots on, when we jump into the Hilux, when we go for a drive around the farm, what you saw in there with the business, is it being reflected out in the paddock? Because if you're seeing a busted-ass show where everything's buggered, pastures are shit, water, infrastructure, guess what? Someone's telling lies. Either that or you've got a really big off-farm investment, which we don't have. Everything's on-farm. So I see a lot of businesses where in benchmarking where they've really got high return on asset managed, but the farm's a shit show. So you might win the benchmarking war, but for me it's about, have we got a really good engine that drives the business? Is it healthy, soil health, pastures, etc., infrastructure? If you don't see that when you drive around, well, you've got to ask the question, what are you actually doing it for? Accommodation is another one, those sorts of things. How much money you actually spend on education in the business, buying brains? Because as I said earlier, the easiest way to build build your balance sheet is to buy brains. And if you look at OptiU that you guys are starting off at Next Gen Agri, That'll be a bit like a little miniature executive link board. You're bringing a group of farmers. I don't know how many you're going to have in those groups.
7 or 8 businesses.
7 or 8 farm businesses. You're bringing them together, and guess what? The easiest way for farmers to learn is farmers teaching farmers. And they look at the simplistic. If something's complicated in agriculture, you'll find it'll never be profitable. It has to be simple. And if you look at the really good farmers, everything they do is simple. And that is one thing I've really learned. It must be simple what you do. And the simplest thing we do, the most profitable thing we do, return per DSE, is a sheep breeding operation, a merino sheep breeding operation, because you've got that security of wool stored for us when we hit a year like 2023 where 78% of mutton, lamb and beef prices crashed in 4 months. We cash flowed through that period with wool that we'd held over 2 financial years, because the other commodities, lamb, mutton and beef, were keeping the business cash flowed. So I open books. The more you share, the more you receive.
We'll just drill in a little bit further on the finances, and you've just touched on the sort of winning the benchmarking competition and then looking around and seeing everything run down. And one of the challenges, if you do chase ROAM, return on asset managed, is obviously R&M, things like that can go out the window, and so you can end up achieving something that looks good in terms of return on assets, but the asset is actually getting degraded and it's becoming less fun to work there, or it's becoming more at risk in terms of environmental exposure, that sort of stuff. How do you, you're obviously 100% focused on making sure it's a financially viable business, but anyone that's ever driven around your place doesn't see a rundown business. They see investment in infrastructure, they'll see investment in fencing, water, pastures, the whole shooting match. How does that work in your head?
When you get your head around the numbers, you're never chasing high prices and you never want to taste low prices. So when you know your KPIs, and your KPIs are like the dashboard on your car, ute, header, tractor, they're just monitoring the business. When I have a sell price, be it lamb, wool, mutton, beef, whatever you want to pick on, if you're a grain grower, grain. If I have a sell price that fits in and you've got the value of your farm as in what the actual value is per hectare, per acre is correct. It's not a 10-year-old number you've got sitting in there, because that'll distort return on asset managed. If I can consistently, over 10 years, get a 4% ROAM year in, year out, and we didn't do that in 2023, I can tell you. If you can consistently average a 4% ROAM and an 8% return on your investment through capital gain, you've got a bloody good business, because 4% ROAM on country at $2,000 an acre isn't that good. A 4% ROAM on $4,000 an acre country is pretty bloody good. So if you were struggling 10 years ago to get a 4% ROAM on $2,000 an acre country, you're going to be struggling today on $4,000 an acre country. So see how things constantly change. Even your benchmarking figures must change. So we know where we've got to take a price at on lamb, mutton and beef to achieve a 4% ROAM. And as soon as I can get that in a swaps position, which we've just started using, or in a forward contract, jump on it. Just lock it in, Eddie, because I don't want the highest price to run this business. I just want a price that consistently is targeted towards a 4% ROAM on a high-value asset. And guess what? 2003, we didn't get it. This year, this financial year we're in, we're going to smoke 4%, which will make up for what we lost last in 2023 financial year. So I can remember February, not this year, the year before, standing in front of the family board saying this business will go back about $780,000. So that was in February. By the end of the financial year, it was actually 1.3. And I said, and I really don't give a bugger, because I can't control that and I'm not worried about it. But what I do know is And it wasn't rainfall driven, this one. This was market driven. The day the market turns around, I know I can bounce back with 2 years of cash flow in 1 year. And that's what the 24-25 financial year is shaping up like at the moment. So I don't get hung up on going backwards and having a negative return. I can't control it. I can't control the markets. But guess what? I'm a step closer to controlling the market this year than what I was last year, simply because of the introductions of swaps in Australia through a company called StoneX. And when a market's collapsing, no one wants to give a forward price because the stone's dropping and they want to catch the stone at the bottom, the feedlotters and the processors. And everyone gets their turn to make a bob. My thing is, I just want to take a position in a forward or a swap where I've locked in the profit of that particular enterprise.
Do you know what it is that keeps you in that abundant mindset even when making those difficult decisions? Like even when the markets are collapsing and you know you're about to lose, I'll predict 700 and end up using 1.3, whatever the numbers are. Have you got any idea what makes you tick differently than the people that'll be stressing it? Well, lots of people stressing about that market drop and not being in a position to actually have the mindset to deal with it?
Yeah, it's because it's been battle tested and measured so often. And you can just go full noise into it now because you know you've got a system that works. It's not that complicated. All we're doing is locking in the profit, taking a forward position and balancing the inventories of grass and money. Because when you run out of grass, you don't have very many options left. And the idea is to sell early if you're going into that route. Sell early, sell little, sell high. If you're doing it at the end of it, you'll sell lots, you'll sell low, and that's just not where you want to be mentally because you need to cash flow it. So for me, the reason, it's just about systems and guardrails, Mark. The guardrails were started to be built in 2007. This hasn't happened overnight. It's taken bloody years to get it where they got narrower and higher the guardrails that keep the business on track. And that is your grass bank and money bank are the things you need to be managing. If you're a grazier, the first thing I'll ask graziers is, how many days of grass you got on hand right now? And wait for the 4-second pause, which tells you they haven't got a bloody clue. Well, how much money you got in the bank right now? Most can tell you within 5 to 10%. What's in the bank? Well, if you're a grazier, your wealth is created from your grass bank. You should know what's in that grass bank because that's what's driving your grazing business.
The thing I like about those concepts is that they're all learnable. Like it's sort of not people born with this innate ability to predict the outcome or to be braver than anyone else. It's just a skill set that everyone can learn and everyone can bring in their businesses. You're going to have to do the battle testing yourself, but getting yourself having the knowledge set to sort of put those guardrails around your businesses. They're all learnable things if you get the people right and get the knowledge right.
Yeah, and like every single dairy farmer knows how many days in the grass bank he's got. But us dryland or non-dairy farmers, absolutely hopeless at measuring grass. And it's the one that drives your business. So, yeah, that abundant mindset has just come from being in control of the grass bank and the money bank and knowing that if I can average 4% ROM on high-value country now, and I've had plenty of blokes here going, oh, geez, I don't know about, why is your target 4%? Because 4% is achievable. And if I get lucky, I get lucky. I might go to 6, 7, 8. The year coming out of the drought was the first time ever we hit a double-digit return on asset. We hit 14.1%, and that would have been land back then valued at about $3,400 an acre. So remember, for 3 years we made nothing. See how in 1 year we jammed 3 years of cash flow into 1 year or 3 years of turnover into 1 year, but we did it using a lot of opium, other people's money, to go and match stocking rate to carrying capacity, and it just didn't stop raining. And the most common phone call to ANZ was, I need more money to buy more animals because it won't stop raining. And their answer back to me was, all we need to see is you've got that risk covered in a forward contract. There was no swaps back then. And that's That's how it still is now. You cover it, we'll cover you. You cover our risk, we'll give you the money. And that's fair. That's a fair business partnership, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something we can drill into a bit, or we probably have before, but just that something I always hear in your language and the way you talk, like it's the bank's a partner, not something to be feared or avoid or whatever. Like they're a key partner in your business. I'm going to ask the question that you ask your mentors, I'm going to give you $1 million, which I'll have to scratch together. I'll have to go and talk to my bank. But where are you going to suggest I invest it in terms of livestock opportunities today, or any agricultural opportunity you can?
Yeah, right today I'd be buying, if I had grass, I'd be buying pregnant merino ewes, because they are so undervalued at the moment. It is ridiculous. And I really, really struggle with what's going on in the Australian sheep industry at the moment. The mindset, the negativity. They remind me of a bunch of spoilt kids that have had everything they wanted and now they haven't got it. And I asked the question, what's changed? Because we had a collapse in lamb and mutton prices in 23. That happened in 4 months. The same thing happened to the cattle industry. I haven't heard a single whinge pretty much anywhere on social media from a cattle producer whinging his guts out about what happened in 2023. And the sheep blokes have never stopped crying. And they talk about, oh, yeah, but direct costs are killing us. What? And direct costs haven't increased or changed for the cattle people? They've stayed stagnant? You're dreaming. Everyone's getting smashed by input costs. So and there's so many blokes getting on social media, I'll go last load of sheep going out today. And I say, well, what are you gonna do to make a bob? What are you going to do? Go into cattle? Well, if you do, I guarantee you'll kill that market in Australia in at least 2 years due to oversupply. The one thing the sheep blokes got really good at on the East Coast, we come out of a 3-year drought and we got that bloody good at breeding lambs and high percentages and weaning percentages. We killed that market through oversupply. But I remember MLA, AWI, when we East Coast come out of that 3-year drought, they're going, we've got to rebuild the numbers, we've got to rebuild the herds and the flocks. And I'm going, why would you want to do that? We've never had it better. And everyone went and rebuilt all their numbers and oversupplied at the click of the fingers. And when we were sitting at half the amount of ewes we normally have, and my prediction is the way sentiment's going in the sheep industry, we will hit 60 million sheep pretty soon. And the day that happens, the kings will be back in their grass castles again. And then we'll go through another boom period in the sheep industry, regardless of breed. Lamb, mutton, wool, everything will go through this natural cycle of boom bust, which is driven by supply. So for all the sheep cockies leaving the industry, going to an enterprise, I don't know what, because the one thing I know that doesn't work is enterprise hopping. And listening to emotion in an industry is bloody dangerous. And the emotion at the moment is we'll do more cropping. Now, I do budgets on cropping twice a year in our environment, 26-inch rainfall environment. And let me tell you, it's the one I see into the future that I wouldn't be investing into. We'll see how right I am in 3-4 years, because it's not so much the input costs, it's the machinery changeover price. And I think of grain prices went through the roof the day that Russia went into the Ukraine. And our grain prices in Australia are dictated by what someone does overseas. When I look at Australia, we're very good at beef, exporting beef, and we're very good at exporting lamb and mutton. But we own the lamb and mutton market pretty much in the world. We own that market, Australia. New Zealand used to be there, and they've lost so many sheep numbers. So for me, I just see the sheep industry in Australia has never had a brighter future. But by Jesus, there's not many think like I do. And whinging about the cost of shearing, well, I go, it's just a cost. If you want to have a whinge about input costs, go and grow some grain for a while. Go and trade in your tractor. Go and get another header and see how you're going. Because infrastructure costs like shearing sheds and good sheep yards and facilities, they're a one-off cost. In the grain industry, we're swapping that machinery over every so many years. And it's on a trajectory at the moment where the price received for grain can't keep up with the increasing cost of machinery replacement. So the more that go out of sheep, the better. And I can tell you now, the kings will return to their grass castles very quickly, driven by negative emotion in the sheep industry. And I know for a fact when all the farmers are going one way, make sure you're going the exact opposite way. So if I had $1 million to invest at the moment, I'd be buying pregnant merino ewes that I can shear, because I'll hold that wool until it becomes too dear to own, and I'll rely on very good mutton and lamb prices to cash flow the business till that happens.
One of the things, and I agree, the sentiment is about as bad as I've seen it in Australia, and it's one of the joys of swapping between across the ditch all the time. You sort of get the feel of what people are thinking, and certainly has been a bit of a battle. One of the things that you hear a bit in Australia more than New Zealand is labour, or the work required in sheep, I suppose, and that's kind of one of the things that people might talk about as to a reason to change enterprises. What's your sort of response to there's too much work in sheep?
I really think we need to have a look at the economics of labour and stop whinging, bitching, complaining, WBC about labour. And I see examples that tell me I'm right all the time, because I get to talk to a lot of people. I get to talk to clients. And this wasn't a client, it was a good friend of mine down in the Holbrook area. He had there was a big operation, sheep cattle, big operation. He had a very good sheep manager who did nothing but manage the sheep, and they'd been sitting consistently on weaning percentages of 135%. And that had been a standard thing with 8,000 ewes. Very well run. That manager actually left and went to work for a corporate, and another guy come in to manage that sheep flock. The next year, the lambing weaning percentages went back to 92% over 8,000 ewes. So that's a difference between 135% and 92%. There's a difference of 3,440 lambs there, and at $150 a head, that's $516,000 difference. One of my mentors told me years ago, and this took a lot of getting my head around because it wasn't the way I was brought up. The more people you employ, the more money you make. And to miss something like that, which was management, not season, wasn't genetics, it was just management, where you had a bloke managing that operation that was on time, ahead of time, all the time, to one that didn't have his experience, cost that business $500,000. So I don't actually see enough labour on farms. And I know for a fact here now, the more people we employ, the more money we make, because it gives the CEO time to be the CEO. And in my case, that is transferring from one generation to the next. So what is it most 30 to 40-year-old male and female people that come into ag do really well? They work their guts out at the coalface because they love being busy and they love ag. To actually be looking at the business side of it, most don't enjoy that because they just love using their hands and being with animals, in our case, or machinery and blah, blah, blah. It's sexy. So for me, we've got to change that. The CEO at a young age needs to be building those guardrails in their business that stops them going off track, which will be driven by emotion, especially now we've got this bitch of a thing called social media that will drive emotion negatively day after day after day after day. We've also got this one where every half-wit in Australia has got a weather app who's predicting the weather and telling you how much rain you're going to get. And that now is influencing decisions that are made. The best thing you can do is delete all those apps, because none of them are correct or even accurate for a given area over a broad area maybe, but not a given area, so where I live or where you live, Mark. So for me, labour is something, it's a bit like opium, other people's money, finance. You've got to be able to have labour on hand to scale up when you need to scale up. And you can say, well, what are they going to do when I'm not scaling up? Well, well, I've never, ever seen a single day where we couldn't keep everyone busy here. So for me, labour is something, it's very hard to de-risk a business and put guardrails into your business and manage the grass bank and manage the money bank if you don't have enough staff that gives the opportunity for that, either the current generation or the next generation, to come in and be to be a CEO. Because the balance sheets and what we've got borrowed now compared to what we had borrowed, I'm talking farmers in general, 10 years ago, they're completely different businesses. And that was created, a lot of that was created, and this is why we need to change, by low interest rates. Do you realise there's no intelligence needed in spending money, but there's a lot of intelligence needed when it comes to making money? Any idiot can spend money and do it really well, be a top 20% producer, spending money, but it's a different thing when it comes to making it. We've got to get really good at putting the guardrails in, which remove emotion out of the business, which actually is the driver of business. Emotion, negative emotion, or simply emotion kills businesses.
I guess maybe you've already answered it, but I'll ask it in a different way. Looking at, I guess, across the broader agriculture industry, there's, for farmers to shift from scarcity thinking to that mindset of abundance, which is what we're talking about. There's a great quote from Seth Godin: "Scarcity breeds fear, and abundance breeds innovation." And so, what we're trying to do is move. What do you think are the opportunities for people to make that move in the next decade? What would your advice to those people that are in that coalface position and know that things need to change, but don't know what's the first step they need to make?
Well, if they knew how to do it, they would have already done it.
Yeah.
If they knew the importance of it, they would have already done it. So see how you're talking about something that's foreign. Well, it was foreign to me and Kate prior to 2007, but one of the things about starting your own business is we were forced by our first business coach to write 1, 3, 5 and 10-year goals, something to shoot at. And for us to achieve those goals, we had to get a whole lot better at the business of agriculture, not farming, the business side of agriculture. So realise that you've got a weakness there. If I asked you, tell me what the guardrails are in your business that keep you on track, and you get to 3 and 4 seconds, there's no replies, you know there is none. So the biggest opportunity I see in farmers is mindset coaching for a start. That'll be your biggest breakthrough in learning what self-sabotage is, subconscious bias is, how you'll go gathering information to make your subconscious bias right. The other big one, then this will come from mindset. The result of really good mindset coaching is you'll start to build systems that fit in with climate variability, which will be the drivers of wealth. So if your systems haven't changed, and I haven't seen a really big system change in southern New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, because they never got hit by a 3-year drought years ago. So they're just in that period now, and there'll be a fair bit of pain going on down there, I would imagine. But if they come out of this one and, say it's a 1.5, 2-year drought, what systems, what guardrails are they going to have in place to deal with this the next time it happens? Inevitably,
we all make mistakes, and you've already covered this. You've made some big ones, some expensive ones over the time. We all have. I guess even when we can plan, we can get our guardrails up, we can be organised. We're still going to have situations that sort of come and bite us. How do you handle those situations when you've got it wrong, when you've done it, used all the best information available and it still didn't work out as planned? What's your sort of approach to those situations?
Yeah, it's very quick. You just work out, what will it cost me to bail out of this now, and what will it cost me if I don't bail out of this now? And I don't know what that is. It's different things. But make the decision quick and then move on. Unfortunately, we learn from our mistakes, and that's where that one-liner come in, let my scars be your learning. I think when you look back at a lot of things that go against you, there's one common denominator, and that was ego stepped in to the decision-making process. So ego should be gone with age. That's what some people call growing up. That's one of Bud Williams's one-liners, and that is so true. My thing is, if you feel it, you smell it, you can taste it that this is going wrong, what can I do to make it right? And if we've gone past that period, then get out of it and balance the two inventories of grass and money back up again. Like a pendulum. If you stay there, you're going to run out of money and run out of grass. Don't let that happen. So this is in a grazing business. Quickly balance that inventory of grass and money back up. And then when you feel you're stable again and everything's back on track, then put higher and narrower guardrails to go back in and make what you just lost. And that can be in the breeding game. One of the things in the breeding game, every time you do something, you've got to ask the question, what is the value of them animals? You're coming up to weaning. Would I buy these calves at what they're valued at today? No, I wouldn't. Well, you better sell them because they're too dear to buy. I'm weaning lambs. They're 38 kilo. They're big monsters. We've had a cracking year. They're $170 odd on Auctions Plus. Would you buy them for that? No, I wouldn't. Then sell them. And then look at something that's undervalued. And a great example of that in Australia for the last 15 months is the gap between steer price and heifer price. It's very hard, and I don't advise anyone to trade sheep if you're running a sheep breeding operation because of virulent foot rot, especially in the south. Stay away from it. But the only negative to trading cattle is you've got to have at least another 6 weeks of grass to do a cattle trade compared to a sheep trade, a fattening job. So take the money off the table when things are going wrong, whether you're a breeder or what you are. Get the money off the table and stop the loss. You've got to stop the loss, and that's probably the best advice I can give. If it doesn't feel right, taste right, it isn't right, your gut's telling you what to do, and it's not driven by emotion, and you'll feel that anxiety come into you in your day-to-day life. And if you happen to be waking up of a night thinking about that one particular thing, let me tell you, your body's telling you to do something about it. And the best way to do it is to get out of it, whatever it is, and fix it up. But procrastination is the fodder that fuels anxiety. And I think one of the big things I learned in that 3-year drought was the people that were consistently and constantly making decisions for their business and their people and their headspace right through that drought were the ones that come out of the drought into the big wet and were still making really, really good decisions when it broke to balance in the balance sheet to get that business back on its feet again. So that all comes back to mindset. And we're talking about mindset coaching, and you had a brilliant one of your podcasts about 6 weeks ago, Haley Grosser, is that the name?
Yeah.
Everything she said resonated with me in simplistic form. Might have been confusing to a lot of people, but she nailed mindset in farmers. And the good thing about it, I think she was farmer's daughter and married to a farmer, so she's talking our language. And for me, mindset coaching builds systems that fit in with managing markets and climate. You must know your numbers, and if you're struggling with something, buy the brains, and that'd be the biggest opportunity I think farmers have at probably those 5 things into the future. To me, abundance thinking will drive a healthy balance sheet, and in my case, I had to learn all that stuff because I wasn't born that way. And then you battle test stuff, and then your systems get stronger and stronger as you get older and older. The secret and ultimate test for our business will be, can we hand over those guardrails to the next generation where they don't decide to pull them down and rebuild the guardrails to suit their bias of how they think the world should be. And that's partly one of the reasons why we have a board in place, a family board. They can reshape everything, but they have to get that passed by the family board before they go ahead and do that. And I'm not saying reshaping is a bad thing. It's a positive thing, just as long as those guardrails get narrower and higher. So, yeah, that's the biggest opportunities I see is in farming industry today is that mindset coaching. and buying brains, bringing into your business to build a bigger, stronger, healthier balance sheet, which builds really good mental health as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I agree with you on Haley's podcast, and definitely recommend people go back and listen to that if they haven't already. It's you won't have to scroll too much further down in the feed to grab that one. Haley Grosser with her I guess her mindset around wealth and money for farmers was some great advice. Nigel, the last question for today, and is one that we've actually asked you first the other day having a chat, and then have since incorporated that into all of our podcasts because I think it's a really interesting question, and that's who's the best human you've had the opportunity to learn from?
When you asked that question, I was absolutely dumbfounded, and I come up with 50 names and none of them I could pick. And then it was, oh God, of course. And that was, you'd never pick it at the time, but in hindsight now, looking back, there was one person that's had the biggest influence over pretty much everything we do, and that was Alan Parker. And we started working with him 17 years ago, and we still work with him today. But it was him that taught us how to conduct yourself as a human being, how to conduct yourself in business, business must revolve around win-win. Both sides of a great business exchange must be win-win. If someone's losing, he walked us through what it feels like to be the loser of a business negotiation, and what's the upside in that, and how great it is, and how good you feel when you create win-win. And I think the success of our business, I think the success of the stud business, which is the Merino one, and now we've kicked off a Wagyu business, which is the next generation coming into our business, revolves around what can we do to grow one another's businesses, the client's business and our business, where we both win. And this year, I think in the sheep business, we're going to have to pull some rabbits out of the hat that we haven't done before to create win-wins. So, and I've got a bit of a mind, but the biggest thing he taught us is self-sabotage, how we keep going back into our past in agriculture to find the reasons not to change into the future. And I'll never forget the day we were in a group for, I think, about 15 months called the Experimental Laboratory, where we'd meet in Sydney once a month for a day, usually on a Friday or Monday. So you'd have a weekend in Sydney. And that particular day, there was about 18 of us in the room. And he said, after lunch, he said, I'll give you 10 minutes to write down in your life all the really negative things that have happened in your life that absolutely affect your business, your decision-making process into the future. So he gave us 10 minutes to do that. And at 8 minutes, he said, "How yous going?" And everyone was sitting there and they're all looking at one another. And then he said, "Well, anyone want to share what you wrote down?" There was 18 people there. Not a single person wrote down anything that was part of their past that's killing their decision-making process into the future. But he said, why is it you keep going back into your past to find all the reasons not to change into the future? And it's so bloody true when you're in touch with that about what your subconscious is doing to you. When you're making decisions, you go, there's nothing there. So I do not give 1 minute of consideration to the past. Tell me what's right. Don't tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's going to make this work, not what's not going to make this work. It doesn't. And then the great thing about it is, and it goes back to a previous question, if the shit hits the fan, the power in this knowledge is, how do I get myself out of this without becoming full of anxiety and depression and feeling like shit? So the power is having that mental toughness to realise, we're in a bit of a jam now. What are we going to do? We're going to quickly get out of it and rebalance the inventories of grass and money. And for me, that rear vision mirror thing, all I think is Nigel, you bullfed, you're going back into that tiny little rear vision mirror to make a decision for the future, and you've got this whole big windscreen out in front of you. He runs a course called the Negotiator's Toolkit, which I've done 3 times. It's just on negotiation to get a win-win. How do you do that? And I think one of the most really important things is he taught us what our listening skills are. And most of us listen to respond, not to hear. And when you listen to hear and not respond, the world's a different place, because you can genuinely pick up with someone where their needs are when you're in negotiation. And your job is to meet that person's needs within can be their personal life or their business life, is to meet their needs, where that creates the win-win. So I think learning how to build win-win business negotiations has been an absolute godsend, but realising how our mind goes into self-sabotage, where the subconscious wants us to keep going back into the past to gather information to make what you're doing into the future wrong. It won't work. And that never exists in my head and hasn't existed in my head for at least 12 years. It's all about the future and what have I got to deal with. I've got to deal with a grass bank and a money bank. That's all I've got to manage is those inventories.
Do you remember when, like, you and Kate, young couple, 3 kids, chipping away on the farm, working daylight to dark, and then you made a decision to find Alan Parker? How the hell did that come about? How did you find Alan Parker, I suppose, and what was it that led you on that track?
Other people see that you need this experience or you need this education. There is a lot smarter people, and this is the thing with being out. Alan Parker would call that in position free, where you're up in the helicopter looking down on the business. We had friends who were pretty smart at business telling us where our weak link was, because we weren't born in a culture where business should be win-win. It was mostly you won when you had a win-lose situation, and now I know that I never ever want to go there. And the best way to know whether you have got a win-lose situation is to switch hats. How would you feel if you were on the receiving end of this negotiation right now? Would you be happy? And straight away you go, oh, shit, I've missed that. I need to go and fix that up. But I think, unfortunately, universities don't teach this. School doesn't teach this. So I have no education at all. I left school at 14, did year 9 and went jackaroo, and I just absolutely have never looked back. But I realised when we got to about 40 that the biggest, weakest link in our business that was going to stop us going ahead was financial literacy was number 1. But we didn't know how to play the game of business. And subconsciously, we went about finding people to bring into our business. We didn't even know what we were doing at the time. We were buying slowly, investing in other people's brains, to buy their brains, to bring them into the business, to help us fix anxiety points in our business, one by one. Fix that one, go on to another one. But the funny thing was, we didn't even know it was happening till 20 years later, and you look back and go, shit, that was a perfectly orchestrated plan that we didn't even know was happening. But what the question is, Mark, what was driving that change? So if you want to keep on track, there is nothing better than setting 1, 3, 5 and 10-year goals, which are your lighthouse on top of the hill that you're driving the business towards. And most of that requires finance and knowledge to do it. And when you go back to people that have said things in your life that had a major change, when we had that T90, I think we had the Business of Sheep Farming field day at home, and Bill Malcolm spoke. And you explain who Bill Malcolm is.
Economics lecturer out of Melbourne Uni, but they've written books on farm economics. He's kind of the father of farm economics, really. Well, he wouldn't claim that. He would claim that some of his mentors are, but yeah, he's certainly been there for a long period, and lots of good things to say about Bill.
So one of the things Bill said that day, and I don't know how many people actually got it, but it just hit me like a bloody tsunami. He was getting fairly revved up, and he had the body language and the arms going. He was sort of banging like this. He said, let me tell you, I get asked to sit at kitchen tables and look at books where we've got someone that wants to introduce a new enterprise into the business that's low risk. And he said, all I know in agriculture, anything that's low risk will be low return. So as the CEO, if we know that to be true, and I know he's 100% true, that is true. If it's low risk, it's low return. Your job, and this is where labour comes into it as the CEO, is your job is to eliminate risk out of your agricultural business, and that is financial risk mainly. I want a high-risk business, but I want to eliminate any risk of losing money. And that's where your guardrails come in and your networks come in. That's where this big bank of brains that you buy and bring into your business is so important, because you share the issue that you want solved to de-risk this, and it all becomes just systemised. And that's what I call battle tested, where it works over and over again. And now we can handle a whole stack of risk in our business, because we've, over the years, we've just been de-risking, writing policies. This hurt us. Let's write a policy so it never hurts us again like that again. So, and that's where I think we have to have enough labour in our businesses that gives us enough time to build those systems, because it's in the easiest way I know of building your balance sheet. And that's why in our business now, our number one enterprise isn't sheep and cattle or grass bank or money bank. It's now managing risk. And everything I do now is I have to have the risk to make money, but how am I going to manage that risk? And it's pretty bloody simple. And that's why, for me, forward selling of products and swaps, and I can't wait for swaps to get established in Australia in the land market, for me, is going to be an absolute bludge. And I mean that. It's going to be really easy to de-risk our exposure to markets. Climate, you're able to manage climate, and it is going to be there belting you and then rewarding you no matter what period we're in. But markets are very much dictated in a lot of cases by what happens overseas, which I have no control of, but I can control that now with these products. So I don't know. I never wrote that one down about we buy brains. And the more brains we buy, the more we build our balance sheet. I never made that connection till yesterday when we were preparing for this. So a bit of advice for me is and people will probably come back and go, well, which brain do we need to buy first? And that's a really easy question to answer. What is it that's creating the most anxiety in your business right now? And in 9 out of 10 cases, that'll be financial literacy. You've got to know your numbers first to make decisions. And up to you, what you're doing is just bringing farmers together, and it'll be farmers teaching farmers, and they will learn literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of learning by being in that group.
And I think we'll start off with cost of production as the first module. So because 100% agree. And interestingly, when we surveyed people, when we were starting to think about what modules would go in it, that was actually the one that resonated most with people as well. They wanted to know more about their finances. So it's not only is it something they need to know, it's something they want to know. So it's kind of
but here's the thing: how do you take a forward position selling something or take a swaps when you don't know what it costs you, but where your break even is?
Yeah.
Well, in our case, we just look at return on asset now when we do our spreadsheets on what we do with a 4% ROAM. We've actually gone past that cost of production thing. We know that because the business is now a whole when you look at it, and learning how to manage your business as a whole is an art form in itself.
Right, I reckon we're getting close to rounding it up. Nigel, is anything we've missed as we've gone through it?
There'll be lots of things we've missed once we listen to it, no doubt. And you'll go, God, how did I miss that? But this is the third podcast we've done about the business of farming. And we've talked about so many different things. It just seems that we can never stop reinventing ourselves. And I think that's a really cool thing in agriculture. It's not stagnant. You should be reinventing yourself and your business. The actual business itself is very simple, but the way you think, you should be reinventing your brain all the time. And given this is the third podcast, what have you picked up, Mark, in this one that we've done that we've never spoke about before that resonated with you during this nearly 2-hour conversation? I don't know what it'll get chopped to, but yeah.
That's a good question, and we have been battling away for over 2 hours now with a few different technical interruptions. And but yeah, I think for me, Nigel, and we've obviously talked a fair bit and have done a couple of podcasts before, but I think there's a couple of things that I think are really key take-homes and things that I've certainly written down here. And one is that buying brains concept, and that does sound a bit self-serving coming from someone like me, but it's so true for my business. And I guess just getting exposed to different information. Like I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts every time I get a spare second, and I know you listen to heaps of podcasts when you're driving, and that's the free brains you can sort of get access to. So I guess that lifetime learning, and getting those. I guess there's nothing like actually getting that direct coach in your business, thinking about your anxieties with you. That's a different. Like I often think I'm learning because I'm listening to a podcast, but actually getting someone who's understanding what's worrying me at the same time has got a lot of value, and something I've certainly written down. I guess that keep making decisions in times that are those leaner times. I guess that's probably something we've sort of covered a bit before, but not really that ability to be really. If you're making a decision every week through drought or through a tough period of prices, you're still in that same, like the processes of the machinery of business are still working. While you might be losing money, you're still making decisions and you're still active and you still feel like you have some control, which is, I think, what all humans hate the most is when they don't have, well, they feel like they don't have control. It's something that none of us can handle very well. And so by actively making decisions will keep you in that mindset or frame of mind that can really then jump out of that period of and actually make the most of it. And then I guess and it's something I think about a lot, and not pretending to be a guru of it, but that power of mindset is such a key thing for ag and key thing for business, or key thing for life, really, that self-chat. And I actually wrote a bit of, was part of an article I wrote recently, that it can destroy you if that sort of voice in your head that's finding all those things in the past that are reasons why you're not going to succeed is something that's there for everybody. I think we probably sit on our own little castles thinking that it's just us that have this voice in their heads, but we're all got it. Everyone you know has got it, and it's keeping that under control. You can never get rid of that voice, but you can certainly turn down its volume and make sure you're looking in that big windscreen rather than the review mirror. But there are a few things that have come out of it for me, Nigel, and I'm sure others will have picked up different things. But I do. And I guess just before we do close out, really keen to make sure if people haven't listened to the previous two conversations, I think they're getting longer as we go. But there's some. I know that a lot of the feedback I get from Ed Shepherd are that they've loved those episodes, which is the reason we're doing a third one. And so I recommend people to go back and listen to that if this is the first one they've listened to. But and obviously people can find you. You're always open to have a chat, so they can find you if they Google Kerin Ag. It won't be too hard to find your website and find you on social media. And I know that you're always happy to take a phone call. And I think that's one of the things that the other things that is important from your discussion around mentors and stuff is that ag is a very inclusive space if you ask the questions. Like, there's not many people that won't give you a hand or offer you some thoughts or give you a bit of a happy to have half an hour on the phone with you. Lots of people love talking about ag and love talking about business. So I think one of the things that we miss out on or we don't think enough about, and it's probably something that's been great in that Xana McDonald Award that you mentioned, is the ability to get young people in the room with more senior people, or just young people in with young people, whatever. But be aware that lots of people will answer the phone and have a chat. Like, you don't have to feel like that there's all these people out there on a pedestal. Everyone's just humans keen to talk about farming. So by all means, pick up the phone and get hold of somebody that you think someone that you could learn a bit from.
Yep. I think for me, just to wrap up with me, very simple, the biggest opportunity I see for farming, I didn't say farmers, I said for farming, is mindset coaching, which boils down to buying brains and reprogramming your brain to have that, I hate the word resilience, and I'm not going to use it. I'd rather use the word unstoppable, to have that unstoppable attitude for everything that's thrown in front of you, for me, that is mindset coaching. And I could have never have done that by myself ever. And as we said earlier, if we knew how to fix it, we would have already fixed it. So that's why you have to, it's a bit crude, but that's why you've got to buy brains and bring outside brains into your business. And I honestly believe the quickest way to rebuild a balance sheet is reset your mind and how you view the world and how it should be and how your business should be. So if you're ever coming up Newell Highway, we're only 50 minutes from Parks, whiz across, have a look, go for a drive around the farm. Saturday or Sundays doesn't worry me, I'm always doing bugger all. Yeah, anyone wants to give me a call, then all means do that. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to talk about a subject that I absolutely love, and that's just the business of agriculture. Thank you, Mark, and thanks, Next Gen Agri.
Thanks, Nigel. Been great to have you as usual. Great to spend a Sunday morning with you. Anyway, we'll look forward to getting this one out there and hearing what people think. But yeah, thanks very much for your time and look forward to catching up.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Heineken, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.